Do you want happiness? If so, for how many days? So this is exactly what Geshe Lhakdor asks his audience. So today we are going to sit down with Geshe Lhakdor, the director of the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives in Dharamshala, and we will explore how to be a compassionate leader, at the same time how to be happy and how to live happily in this chaotic world. So we'll just explore on all these things with Geshe Lhakdor. Geshe, thank you so much for giving us this wonderful time. So I'll just start with one of the major problems that world faces today. So we live in a very chaotic world, and we see lots of wars happening. Not just wars. If you look at the Western world, there's gun violence happening in schools. People are mentally disturbed. So, sir, Geshe, according to you, what is the remedy for these problems? So how can we look at these problems and solve in today's world?
As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, we are facing two types of sufferings. One, suffering from natural calamities, which is to some extent unavoidable. We don't have much control. Second suffering is man-created suffering. And man-created sufferings are essentially unnecessary suffering. So we need to realize this. And then the most important thing is you need to sit down and think carefully whether you really want happiness or not. If you want happiness, then you need to find the causes for happiness and cultivate them, nurture them, and teaching compassion and loving kindness as a part of education curriculum. That's very, very important. Because much of the problem that we are facing today is essentially, the source is in our mind, the negative emotions, segregation, differentiation, exploitation, corruption, things like that. So this cannot be solved easily because we are completely attracted by the external material marvels, and especially young people who do not have life's experience, they get completely carried away by immediate sensual objects, the material marvels. So therefore you need to come up with a system of education where you need to clearly tell people that the real happiness has to come from one's own mental attitude, not just by material collections.
Geshe, you rightly said that most of the problems that we have today are actually created by humans. So I think the solutions can be found in human as well. So His Holiness says that compassion is one of the major aspects of humanity that can have solutions for today's world. That's why His Holiness has come up with secular ethics, and His Holiness has also come up with this very beautiful analogy where His Holiness says that compassion is like a water, something that we can't live without it. So, Geshe, how do you think that we can cultivate compassion so that the future world will be better for the future generation?
As I mentioned earlier, you have to have clear recognition that you want reliable, long-lasting happiness. And the way to gain happiness is to live in harmony with others. And the glue to that relationship with others is compassion. It's like a glue which brings everybody together. And in this regard, you can think that you have started your life with the compassionate and loving care of your parents, especially your mother. And imagine if you are deprived of those loving kindness and compassion when you were a small child, then your physical and mental development will not be complete. So with this realization, we are not talking about religious practice. This is not necessarily a religious practice, because our physical and mental, state needs that compassion, that love, without which your physical growth will be hampered, your mental growth will also be hampered. So therefore, if you really want to excel and become good in your business, in your health, then the solution is to develop those important mental attitudes like compassion and loving kindness. Yeah.
Geshe, if you look at His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, uh, people from all across the world look at him as a very compassionate leader. So, how important do you think that having a compassionate leader in our community, not just in our community, but in the whole world, will really have positive impacts on the upcoming generation?
So for the upcoming generation and also for the community and the nation and the international community, it is highly important to have leaders with wisdom, leaders with compassion. Unfortunately, today, such leaders are far and few. So a clear indication is that the problems that we are facing today is, as Obama has mentioned, that it is really indication of compassion or empathy deficit, right? So therefore, especially when we talk about being compassionate to community and the world at large, that compassion must be based on wisdom, meaning that if you look carefully, we are all, whether you like it or not, we are all closely connected, right? Especially in today's world when we are hurled into the face of each other through the speed of science and technology. There's no way you can avoid this relationship and connection. So it is because of this fact that we need to live together. Then the way to live together, as I mentioned earlier, the glue is compassion, caring, right? Without which, if you really, contrarily, if you think about like selfishness, and many leaders and many people do that I don't care what others think, what others do. It's not my job. My job is just to take care of myself and my family, right? So that kind of thinking is actually short-sighted. In the long run, you will also be surrounded by people who will not care about you, right? Today we are living in the community world, community of society. We are not living like Robinson Crusoe, we can't afford to live alone. So this being the case, so therefore developing compassion is not a luxury. It is necessity without which you can't survive. Yeah.
Geshe, this is exactly what I will be asking about the difference between compassion and empathy. If you look at the leaders of today's world, they have empathy for their own people. So, how do you differentiate between compassion and empathy? And obviously, compassion is more important than empathy, but empathy can be the source of compassion. So, how do you differentiate it?
Empathy, as they normally describe, walking in other people's shoes. For example, if there's a lady or somebody who is wearing a high heel shoes, and if you have not walked in that shoes, you will not understand how comfortable it is, right? Right? So therefore, feeling what others are feeling, that's meaning of empathy. But compassion is much more kind of advanced in thinking. It is really a big step forward. So simply said, compassion is empathy plus action.
Empathy plus action.
Yeah.
So, Geshe, how do we act in that way? Because for someone like me, I always try to practice 8 verses for training mind in the early morning whenever I can. So that really helps me, and it can also tame my mind, so that I get lots of satisfactions even if I come across so many destructive emotions. So, what are the major ways to cultivate compassion?
Major ways is, as His Holiness says, if you want to be selfish, be wisely selfish. Meaning that if you, in the name of being selfish, if you completely ignore the needs of others, that's really selfish and you will not get what you want.
But as you said, that compassion is not a luxury. So His Holiness also says that someone has to be very bold. So how do you differentiate between compassion and empathy? And obviously, compassion is more important than empathy. But empathy can be the source of compassion. So how do you differentiate it?
Empathy, as they normally describe, walking in other people's shoes. For example, if there's a lady or somebody who is wearing a high heel shoes, and if you have not walked in that shoes, you will not understand how comfortable it is, right? Right? So therefore, feeling what others are feeling, that's meaning of empathy. But compassion is much more kind of advanced in thinking. It is really a big step forward. So simply said, compassion is empathy plus action.
Empathy plus action.
Yeah.
So, Geshe, how do we act in that way? Because for someone like me, I always try to practice 8 verses for training mind in the early morning whenever I can. So that really helps me, and it can also tame my mind, so that I get lots of satisfactions even if I come across so many destructive emotions. So, what are the major ways to cultivate compassion?
Major ways is, as His Holiness says, if you want to be selfish, be wisely selfish. Meaning that if you, in the name of being selfish, if you completely ignore the needs of others, that is really selfish and you will not get what you want. So be wisely selfish means the more you care about others, the more you are able to reap the benefit. So compassion, simply said, when you talk about developing compassion to other people, it's really not making a self-sacrifice. Because the first beneficiary of this good product of that compassionate practice is yourself. For example, if I imagine and say, as you read in the 8 verses, how nice if all sentient beings meet with happiness. Okay, how much that thinking will affect others is questionable. Unless you are, highly spiritually realized, it's difficult to say. But you will immediately feel happy because you are now, removing that narrow-mindedness, selfishness. You are opening your inner door, right? So therefore, you become very relaxed and very happy.
Geshe, I've been noticing that lots of people from India and abroad look at you and revere you. Really, I personally saw it. So you have been practicing Buddhism, not just Buddhism, but the major teachings of the main teachings of the Buddhism, that is to be kind and to cultivate compassion. So when you look back in the hindsight, how do you look at your life? Um, if you were not a monk, what would have been your situation?
No, first of all, I was born in Tibet, and if I had not escaped Tibet, I will be a shepherd. Lugzi. I will definitely, because we are nomadic area, so there's the only thing. And then as I grow up, I definitely have married somebody, you see, and have few children. That's 100% sure. As an ordinary nomadic way of life, there's personally, the possibility. But so being able to escape Tibet into free country, it's a big plus point for me. And then secondly, after escaping into Tibet, we got this opportunity to go into Tibetan schools, starting from the very beginning and until I finished my 11th class. So there we again got this opportunity of listening to His Holiness's teachings of our spiritual instructors, and reading, Tibetan spiritual books. So that, whether you know it very clearly or not, that must have silently made a lot of impact in your mind. And then later on, I had this privilege of working with His Holiness for 16 years as his translator. And then I have clearly seen how much His Holiness is helping other people, how much benefit others are benefiting from His Holiness teachings and so forth. So all these observations and surroundings and experiences definitely have made some impact. Although I'm like a stone, even a stone, if it is left in the water for a long time, it may not be able to soak the inner, side of the stone, but at least some kind of moisture will be there on the top. So I feel something like that. Yeah.
Geshe, if I'm not mistaken, I heard that you are going to you will be retired soon. So, what are your plans after retiring from?
I have no plan because of your age, and also it doesn't really look good to hold on to one post. at least you make this offer. I already made this offer that let us now appoint somebody in my place, because it's always important to give opportunity to others, especially the younger generation. So I have already extended that kind of suggestion to Sichong and others, the governing body members. But so far they are all insisting, please continue, continue. So I'm still lingering, right? But sooner or later, of course, I have to do it. But my fundamental belief is, as long as you're physically capable, there should not be anything called retirement. You may be not actively working in a particular institution, but still, as much as possible, you should interact with people, especially the younger generation, to share the learnings that you had gone through in your life, the experiences that you had in your life. So many of these are very, very important for young people. They do not have those experiences. So as you grow older, the knowledge that you have is almost like a, you know, uh, crystallization, you know, of all those experiences together. So these days, if people ask me, to say something, I'm able to say so many things, because not only I had a lot of education and a lot of experiences, but I also know what is the essence, what is it that you really need in your life, whoever you are, right? So those kind of sharing those life's experiences, the crystallized experiences to the younger generation, it's almost like offering a ready-made food, because many people don't have that kind of insight and understanding. So those things, as much as possible, I will continue to do.
Gisela, I'll share with you this anecdote. Back in our school days, when we were in school, when we give our class 10 and 12 examination, even if we secure like the passing marks, that is 33, right? Tibetan students would distribute ladus, the sweets, to classmates. But in India, there's this common perspective. Even if a student gets 95 percentage, that is his or her not the targeted percentage, but sometimes they commit suicide. So do you see a fundamental difference between Indians and Tibetans, like how they think about their life, how they look at the reality?
It is basically, it may not be so evident now in the Tibetan society, but this is very much there in more advanced countries, especially in India, because number one, they have peer pressure. Number two, family pressure, because the families and the elders, many of them, they are quite stupid, to be honest, because they don't really think about how he or she can contribute to the flourishing of life of their child. Number is nothing. I remember a very interesting story told by a great Indian teacher. I've now forgot his name. So he said this very method of uh, passing somebody, if you are able to make 33 marks, that itself is, according to him, is not a healthy way of judging the student. He said, for example, if you are recruiting a cook and ask him to make rotis, yeah. So ask him to make 100 chapatis. So out of which he is able to make only 33 chapatis, correct? Rest are all burnt. Will you accept somebody as the cook? So this very kind of judgment based on percentages, number one, misplaced. Number two, the very concept of education is misunderstood, because today education means literacy, reading, writing, mathematics. But honestly speaking, that's not education. Education should be targeted towards human flourishing, to make human beings compassionate, happy. That is the goal. So when you don't have that understanding, then you put pressure for your children, on your students, to get as much as high mark as possible, right? So that is actually, I think, wrong method.
Now, Kishila, I'll also come up with a discussion on the suicide, because that is the last resort when they don't have any other options. So they resort to these. So if someone who thinks they don't have any other options and tries to committing suicide, how would you advise them, like how they should think about their life? So that would be really helpful.
The people who think about committing suicide is clearly based on immediate problems and pressures, and who don't have a more holistic, larger perspective. People who don't have a larger holistic perspective of life, then they try to achieve one particular thing. If they are not able to achieve that one particular thing, then they think I'm lost. I better commit suicide. But if you look at life carefully, you may have not gained success in one particular thing, but there are so many other areas where you can go, right? So many other areas. And number two, if you did not make any attempt, then there is a reason that you feel sad, regret. But if you had made attempt, studied hard, and don't achieve the result, okay, I did my best, so I do something else. So this is clearly, based on narrow-mindedness, number one. Number two, they do not also have the understanding of the meaning of life itself and the continuity of the life. So committing suicide is actually killing. It's equal to killing. Physically you are killing yourself, but that does not solve the problem because you cannot kill the mind. The mind will continue, right? So if with that understanding, if you develop that, then also sometimes you may have failed in one area, but you may have so many other achievements and qualifications.
Yes.
So you just concentrate on the failure, not on the success. So it's always important to think about the success, things that you've achieved. And actually, I myself encountered a number of people who were thinking about committing suicide, and I highlighted their achievement, their good qualities, their good look, and things like that. And then they completely change, you see. So it's important to appreciate your capacity, your qualities. It's very important.
Geshe, so His Holiness has also come up with this concept called secular ethics. And His Holiness is he is not promoting Buddhism around the world. What he has been doing is to promote the insightful teachings of Buddhism to the world, so that can be practiced by any human beings, be it atheist or someone who doesn't believe in religion at all. So can you tell us about the importance of secular ethics, like how one can implement it, particularly people in Western world?
Ethics in general, whether you are living in the West or East, wherever you are living, ethics is the pillar of success in life. For example, if you are not ethical and resort to a lot of drinking, for example, that is not the worst example that I'm giving, but let us say you resort to drinking, not only you will lose money, you will lose your health, right? And then when you get intoxicated, you will start fighting with the other. So it's impossible to make any progress just with one vice, right? So take this example. So when we talk about observing ethics, we are really not talking about being a Buddhist or become a monk and don't mix with other people and stay quiet and remain isolated. We are not talking about those things. So ethics basically has three meanings. One is refrain from harming others, right?
Yes.
It's very important. Second, refrain from harming others is good, but that's not enough. Also help others. Helping others is also good, but that's not enough. You should also cultivate the positive qualities. So refrain from negative qualities, that's not enough. Cultivate good qualities, that is very good, but still the purpose of all these practices at the end of the day is to help others. So if you're doing this, then you're ethical. If you're not doing this kind of practice, but sitting alone, not moving, and it's questionable whether it's ethical or not ethical. Because whether something is ethical or not ethical can be understood in connection with how you relate with other people.
So Geshe, so I also had the privilege of speaking to different Indian students. So I always try to tell them about the importance of secular ethics, not just secular ethics, the importance of the ancient Indian wisdom. And so this is the fourth commitment of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. So my last question is obviously about Indians, like how Indian youth must internalize the importance of their ancient Indian wisdom so that it can contribute to the world in future.
Ancient Indian wisdom means, number one, wisdom of dialogue among the different religious traditions. If you look at the Indian original religion, Indian religion does not have one teacher. Like Buddhism, we have one teacher, Buddha, from where everything originated. But the Indian kind of religion does not have it, right? So therefore, there is Indian religion is a religion of dialogue. So you should learn dialogue, with other religions, with other people, with other communities. That's the number one, very, very important. And respecting Indian religion includes Buddhism, Jainism, and so many of these things, which is, of course, very, very important. And then, secondly, religious practice is really related to the spiritual mental transformation. It's not like building a temple or going around the temple or doing things like that. It is spiritual transformation, mental transformation. Dharan kare to dharm. When you practice and transform your mind, that is called religious practice. So that is, of course, very, very important. But unfortunately, with the passage of time, religious practices are degenerating into rituals and rites and ceremonies. You go early morning, you go to a temple, ring the bell, then after that you engage in cheating, corruption, exploitation. Really? So therefore, if you are somebody who sincerely understands religion and practice it, then the corruption will decrease, exploitation will decrease, segregation will decrease, all the bad things will decrease. So therefore, to be ethical and to be spiritual in the true sense of the term is solution for all the ills in India or any part of the world. If that is not, for example, take the case of our Tibetan exile CTA. I'm really proud to say CTA because of the great vision and guidance by His Holiness Dalai Lama. CTA is almost like free from corruption.
No.
It's a big achievement. And that's why with limited funding, everything, we are making so much progress in the settlement or in the government or wherever, right? And whereas there are other countries who have a lot of money, but they all, like during election, you can see you're basically buying people. And we have now reached to such a shameless state that we do it openly, right? And the result is people start thinking, okay, what you need is money. If you have money, you can do everything. Of course, at the end of the day, you can't do everything.
No.
Then you get into all kind of problems, right?
So, Geshe, thank you so much for doing this podcast with us. It really means a lot. Thank you so much, Geshe.